The first snowfall of December glazed the Chicago skyline like a cruel joke, the kind that makes you feel small and forgotten. And as Emily Parker sat in her apartment, surrounded by the faint glow of birthday candles she'd lit for herself, she couldn't help but think that 30 wasn't supposed to feel like this. Not empty, not quiet, not so damn invisible. She'd told herself she didn't care that her mother hadn't called, that her father's text, "Happy B-Day, kiddo, busy today," was enough. But when she saw the family group chat explode with photos of her sister Lily boarding a flight to Paris, champagne in hand, laughing with her influencer friends on her way to a luxury partnership, something inside Emily cracked. Something small and sharp and final. All her life, she'd been the shadow to Lily's light, the practical daughter, the one who paid bills on time, kept a steady job, stayed polite, stayed useful. When Lily crashed their parents' car at 19, Emily was the one who took on an extra job to help with insurance. When Lily dropped out of college to find herself, Emily was the one who quietly transferred money so their parents wouldn't lose sleep. Yet somehow, Lily was still the star, the golden girl with a social media following and a family who acted like the world revolved around her next adventure. Emily's own achievements, her degree, her steady climb in finance, her modest apartment downtown, were treated like background noise, respectable but uninspiring. Tonight, staring at a store-bought cake with exactly 3 candles, Emily realized that every time she'd been told, "We're so proud of you, sweetie," had always been followed by, "Have you seen what Lily's doing?" The silence of her apartment pressed against her ribs, and she thought about the restaurant reservations she'd made 2 weeks ago, hopeful her parents might actually come, but her mother had canceled that morning, her voice casual and bright. "Oh, honey, Lily's got an amazing opportunity. We're heading to the airport to see her off. Can we do your dinner next weekend? You understand, right?" Emily had said yes, of course she did, because that's what she always said. But now, watching the city lights flicker outside, she understood something colder. They would never come. Not for her. She'd been the reliable one for too long, the kind of daughter people assume will never need attention. And yet tonight, for the first time, she wanted more than acknowledgement. She wanted proof that she mattered. She wanted to stop being the background character in her own life. Her phone buzzed again. Lily's Instagram story, all filters and laughter, captioned, "Off to Paris. So grateful for my supportive fam." The comment section bloomed with hearts and admiration, while Emily scrolled in silence, her chest tightening. She thought about deleting social media altogether, but something made her stop, not out of envy, but clarity. If Lily was chasing fame, maybe Emily could chase something quieter, but far more powerful. Success. Real success. The kind you don't need to post about because the world will come to you. She remembered the half-finished pitch deck on her laptop, the one for the startup idea she'd shelved months ago after her boss called it too ambitious for someone without connections. Bright Budget, a financial literacy app for women, designed to make budgeting and investing less intimidating. She'd built the prototype herself, late nights after work, but then lost nerve when her parents said, "That's nice, dear, but maybe focus on keeping your stable job." She listened, as she always did. But now sitting alone on her 30th birthday, with no calls, no visitors, and no cake but the one she'd bought from the corner store, something hardened in her. She blew out the candles, not with a wish, but a vow. This would be the last year anyone ignored her. Tomorrow, she'd take her savings, quit her job, and build something that would make them all remember her name. The idea scared her. She had no investors, no co-founders, no family cheering her on, but maybe that was her freedom. She didn't need permission anymore. Her whole life had been about earning validation. Now she'd earn victory. As she rinsed the frosting from her fork and looked out over the city's glittering skyline, Emily imagined the future like a storm forming on the horizon, the kind of storm no one sees coming until it changes everything. Somewhere deep inside, she smiled, not because she was happy, but because she was finally angry enough to start. Tomorrow, Chicago would wake up the same as always, cold and indifferent, but Emily Parker would not.
The next morning, Chicago felt different. Not because the city had changed, but because Emily Parker finally had. The same sidewalks she'd trudged down for years now felt like a countdown to something irreversible. And by the time she reached the revolving glass doors of Easton and Wilkes Financial, her mind was already made up. She'd spent 7 years inside that glass box of corporate fluorescent light, crunching numbers for people who didn't know her name, chasing promotions that always went to the louder, flashier colleagues who fit the culture better. As she sat at her desk, watching her boss, Brian, strut past with his usual coffee and arrogance, she opened a blank email, typed resignation in the subject line, and for a brief second hesitated. She could still play it safe. She could still stay invisible and stable. But then she remembered her 30th birthday, her mother's cheerful dismissal, and Lily's smiling face framed by the Eiffel Tower. Her fingers started moving before she could stop them. She wrote her resignation like a declaration. I'm ready for something bigger. When she hit send, it felt like leaping into ice water. Shocking, terrifying, alive. She packed her things quietly, the cheap office air smelling of printer ink and recycled ambition, and as she stepped outside into the biting wind, the world suddenly looked enormous. Freedom was heavy, she realized. Not romantic like the movies, but raw and unsteady, the kind that makes your stomach twist with both fear and hope. For weeks after quitting, she threw herself into Bright Budget, her half-built dream that had lived too long in the someday folder. Her apartment became a battlefield of sticky notes, sketches, coffee cups, and discarded versions of the app's logo. She coded through the night, living on ramen and adrenaline, watching tutorial after tutorial until her eyes burned. There were days she felt brilliant, like she was building something the world needed, and days she felt like a fool who'd just torched her career for a fantasy. Her parents didn't make it easier. When she told them she'd quit her job, her mother's silence on the phone was sharp enough to bleed through the receiver. "Emily, you're 30, she'd said finally, the tone a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. You can't just throw stability away. Be realistic. And then, inevitably, why can't you be more like Lily? She's doing what she loves and she's successful." Emily almost laughed. Lily's success was posing with skincare brands and hotel rooms she didn't pay for, but she didn't bother explaining. Instead, she lied and said, "I'll be fine, Mom," even though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. Nights blurred into mornings as she built version after version of the app, perfecting the budgeting interface, designing bite-sized lessons for women intimidated by finance, women like her younger self who'd been told money talk was for men in suits. She started posting quietly on LinkedIn and small business forums, offering free workshops online. A few people signed up, then a few more. Her heart raced every time a stranger downloaded the beta version of Bright Budget. But bills piled up, rent loomed, and her savings drained faster than she could refill them. There were mornings she couldn't look at her reflection without wondering if she'd made a colossal mistake. Her hands shook when she checked her dwindling bank balance. She picked up freelance work to stay afloat, late-night copy edits, ghostwriting financial blogs, anything to keep the lights on while she chased the bigger dream. She told no one, not even her best friend Hannah, who kept asking when Emily would get back to real work. But something inside her had changed. That part of her that always obeyed, always played nice, was gone. One freezing February evening, her laptop crashed in the middle of a coding update, wiping out 2 weeks of work. Emily sat there in the dim blue glow of the screen, tears stinging her eyes, thinking maybe this was the universe's way of saying she wasn't meant for this. She pressed her forehead to the desk and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a woman named Maria Lopez. "Hi, I attended your webinar last week. I just wanted to say thank you. I finally made a budget that works for me and my kids. You're changing lives." Emily stared at the message until the words blurred. That single text from a stranger pulled her back from the edge. She reopened her laptop, rebuilt everything from scratch, this time smarter, cleaner, better. She started networking at local meetups, pitching her app to anyone who'd listen. Most didn't. Some smiled politely and walked away. But a very few, stayed to listen. One was a venture capitalist named Catherine Shaw, who gave her a business card with the faintest hint of interest. "Keep me posted," she said. "Women helping women, that's a story I can get behind." That night, she pinned the card to her wall like a talisman. The next morning, she got up before dawn, brewed cheap coffee, and dove in again. She coded through exhaustion, pitched through rejection, and willed herself to believe that someday all this quiet suffering would turn into something loud enough to echo. And deep down, she began to sense it. The momentum shifting, the silence before the breakthrough. There was a power growing inside her that she hadn't felt in years, something close to fury but shaped by purpose. The world had ignored her for 30 decades. Fine. She'd make something so undeniable, they'd have no choice but to see her.
Spring came to Chicago with the kind of false warmth that tricks you into believing the world might finally go your way. And as Emily Parker sat in her cluttered apartment, now more startup war zone than home, she realized she had built something real, something breathing, something that wanted to live beyond her laptop screen. Bright Budget was no longer an idea. It was a functioning app with real users, 217 to be exact, each one a woman who had stumbled upon her late-night workshops or word-of-mouth mentions on social media. They weren't glamorous influencers or high-earning professionals. They were single mothers, college grads drowning in debt, and women who'd been told they were bad with money their whole lives. Emily read every email they sent, every thank you, every this actually makes sense. And those messages became the fuel she ran on. She couldn't afford advertising, so she hustled in ways big companies wouldn't, posting financial tips in Reddit threads, commenting on women's Facebook groups, and personally answering questions from users at 2 a.m. When a local podcaster invited her on to talk about financial literacy, she showed up in a thrifted blazer and sneakers, her heart pounding like she was walking into an ambush. But the episode went viral, not because she was polished, but because she was real. She didn't talk like a corporate spokesperson. She talked like a woman who'd been overlooked and was done apologizing for wanting better. Overnight, downloads tripled. Her inbox exploded. Emily could hardly keep up with the messages, the feature requests, the praise, and the pressure. She worked 16-hour days, coding, writing newsletters, recording voiceovers for short Money Minutes videos. Her landlord complained about the noise. Her parents complained about her obsession. "You're isolating yourself," her mother scolded on one of their rare calls. "You need to slow down. Come home for dinner sometime. Lily's back from Paris. Maybe she can give you advice about marketing." Emily bit back the bitter laugh that rose in her throat. Lily's advice would probably be to take more selfies. "I'm good, Mom," she said instead. "I'm finally good." But truthfully, she wasn't. Her body ached from exhaustion, her eyes stung from too many nights staring at blue light. Her savings were almost gone. The money from her freelance gigs barely covered groceries. She'd gambled everything on this dream, and even though success was growing, it still wasn't profitable. Some nights she cried quietly into her pillow, wondering what it would feel like to just give up. And then one day, something changed. She got an email from the Chicago Tribune. "Hi, Emily. We came across your app, Bright Budget. Would you be open to an interview about how you're helping women take control of their finances?" Emily stared at the email in disbelief. When the article went live, titled "One Woman's Mission to Change How Chicago Thinks About Money," her phone didn't stop buzzing for 2 days. New users poured in, her website crashed twice from traffic, then came local TV segments, then a speaking invite at Northwestern. Each step terrified her. Public speaking had never been her strength, but she said yes anyway. Because every time she stood behind a microphone, she thought of that lonely birthday, of being the girl nobody noticed, and she promised herself she'd never shrink again. Slowly, Bright Budget began to attract attention from people who mattered in the startup world. She was invited to pitch at a women's entrepreneur event downtown, and that's where she saw Catherine Shaw again, the investor who had told her, "Keep me posted." This time, Catherine didn't walk away. She listened. She nodded. And when Emily finished her pitch, sweating under the bright lights, Catherine smiled and said, "Let's talk next week." That meeting changed everything. Catherine wasn't just an investor. She was a believer. She offered $300,000 in seed funding, enough to hire 2 developers and finally move Bright Budget out of Emily's apartment and into a co-working space with floor-to-ceiling windows and endless coffee. Emily cried in the elevator the first day she walked into that space, not from pride, but disbelief that it was really happening.
Her parents still didn't know the scale of what she was doing. She'd stopped telling them anything after too many dismissive, "That's nice, honey," responses. Lily, meanwhile, was losing sponsorships after a series of tone-deaf posts during her Paris trip. The internet had turned on her, calling her fake, privileged, and out of touch. Emily saw the drama unfold on social media, but didn't comment. She'd learned the value of silence. By summer, Bright Budget had 50,000 users and counting. Women from across the country were writing testimonials, journalists were calling her the quiet disruptor, and Catherine was urging her to scale nationally. Emily moved into a sleek apartment overlooking the river. Still minimalist, still humble, but it felt like proof of something she'd built with her own hands. She started dressing differently too. Crisp blazers, soft gold jewelry, the kind of clothes that whispered confidence instead of begging for it. When she walked through downtown now, she noticed people looking at her differently. But more than that, she looked at herself differently. She'd built something from nothing. She didn't need anyone's permission anymore. Still, late at night, when the office lights dimmed and her team logged off, she'd sometimes stare out at the city and think of her family. Would they ever see her? Would they ever care, or would she always be the one they forgot while cheering for Lily's latest trip? Those thoughts didn't hurt as much as they used to. They fueled her. Her revenge wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. And in the quiet hum of the city below, she made a new vow. She would take Bright Budget to the top. She would rewrite her story. And when the world finally said her name, her family would hear it too, loud and clear.
By the time autumn rolled across the Chicago skyline, painting the city in copper and gold, Emily Parker was no longer the woman who once cried over a store-bought cake in her apartment. She was the CEO of a startup that every investor wanted a piece of, the quiet hurricane that had torn through the male-dominated world of fintech without ever raising her voice. Bright Budget had grown beyond her imagination. 1 million downloads, partnerships with nonprofits and banks, features in Forbes and TechCrunch, all built on the foundation of honesty and grit that Emily refused to compromise on. She'd become the face of financial literacy for women in America, appearing on morning shows, podcasts, and panels where people introduced her as a disruptor redefining empowerment. Though she still sometimes caught herself laughing at the absurdity of it all, remembering the nights she'd coded from her couch with shaking hands. But what surprised her most wasn't the fame or the money. It was how easily she'd slipped into leadership. The same woman who used to avoid confrontation was now making million-dollar decisions before breakfast, mentoring young women who reminded her of herself. She'd built a small but loyal team who believed in her mission, people who saw in her not just a boss, but a blueprint for resilience. Catherine Shaw had become both investor and friend, urging her to think bigger, global expansion, financial education programs, schools, communities. "You've started a movement," Catherine said one evening over dinner at a rooftop restaurant, city lights reflecting off their wine glasses. "You're not just building an app, you're changing how women think about money." Emily smiled, humbled, but focused. "Then let's make it unstoppable." And they did. Within 6 months, Bright Budget partnered with a major bank to create free budgeting tools for low-income households, and the story went national. Suddenly, Emily's face was everywhere. Magazine covers, business conferences, college campuses. Her inbox filled with invitations, sponsorship offers, even marriage proposals. But beneath the polished surface, she still carried the quiet ache of her family's absence. Her parents hadn't called once, not even after seeing her on television. At first, she told herself she didn't care, that success was its own validation. But late at night, she sometimes caught herself checking her phone, hoping for a text from her mom that never came. Then, one afternoon, her phone rang, and when she saw her mother's name flash across the screen, her stomach clenched. "Emily," her mother began, her voice carefully polite, "we've been meaning to reach out. Your father and I saw that article about you. We're so proud, sweetheart. We had no idea you were doing so well." The words were warm, but something in the tone felt brittle, rehearsed. Emily's chest tightened. Now they were proud. After all these years of silence, they'd called not out of love, but out of curiosity. And then came the real reason. "Your sister's having a hard time," her mother said gently. "You know how social media can be cruel. She's struggling financially. Maybe you could talk to her. Help her get back on her feet?" Emily's fingers curled around the phone. The irony was almost poetic. The golden child, who once had everything, was now calling the forgotten one for help. She could hear Lily's muffled sobs in the background, the sound of fragile pride cracking. "I'll think about it," Emily said, her voice steady. "I've got meetings this week." She hung up before her mother could reply, staring at her reflection in the glass office wall. The face staring back wasn't the timid daughter they remembered. It was someone forged in fire and solitude. That night, she received a text from Lily. "Hey, Em, Mom said you're doing great. Can we talk? I could really use some advice." For hours, Emily stared at the message, torn between compassion and vindication. The younger version of her would have answered immediately, desperate to please. But the woman she'd become understood that silence could be louder than any revenge. She didn't reply. Days later, she attended a gala in New York where she was honored as one of Fortune's top 40 under 40. As she stood at the podium in her sleek black dress, accepting the award, flashbulbs flickering like fireworks, she spoke not about money or technology, but about invisibility. For years, she told the crowd, her voice unwavering, "I thought success was about being seen, but real success is about seeing yourself, even when no one else does." The room erupted in applause. Back in her hotel suite that night, overlooking the glittering city, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She wasn't chasing approval anymore. She was rewriting the narrative. Her story wasn't about revenge, it was about rebirth. Yet when she checked her phone before bed, there it was again. Another text from her mother. "Please call us. It's important." Against her better judgment, she called. This time, her father answered, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "Em, your sister's in trouble. She's got debt, bad publicity. She's lost everything. We didn't know who else to turn to." The old Emily would have melted at the word family, but this Emily paused, her mind clear and cold. "I'll see what I can do," she said finally, then hung up. When she returned to Chicago, it wasn't as the daughter who'd been ignored. It was as the woman they'd underestimated. Her name was on billboards, her company worth millions, her story taught in entrepreneurship classes. As her car rolled up to her parents' suburban home, the same one she'd grown up in, she felt no fear, only resolve. Inside, Lily sat on the couch, tear-streaked and fragile, scrolling through hate comments on her phone. Her mother rushed forward, arms open, babbling about how, "We always knew you'd do great things," while her father awkwardly offered a handshake. Emily smiled, not cruelly, but calmly. "It's good to see you." And for the first time, she meant it. Revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was walking into the same room where you were once invisible and realizing you no longer need their validation. She wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. She was the one who'd made it on her own terms, and nothing they could say would change that. The air inside the Parker house felt different, heavier somehow, like the walls themselves remembered every slight, every silence, every year of being unseen. And as Emily stood in the same living room where she'd once spent her birthdays waiting for acknowledgement that never came, she realized how small everything looked now. The framed family photos, the floral couch, the faint smell of her mother's perfume mixed with old dust. Lily sat on that same couch, dressed in sweatpants, her face puffy from tears and anxiety, her once flawless influencer aura stripped away by reality. Beside her, their parents hovered with the nervous energy of people who'd finally realized the pedestal they built had cracked. "You look amazing, Em," her mother said too quickly, her smile trembling as though politeness could erase years of dismissal. "We've been following all your success, dear. It's incredible." Her father nodded stiffly, unable to meet her eyes, and Emily felt a familiar flicker of hurt. But it didn't sting like before. It was distant now, like a scar long since healed. She took a seat opposite them, crossing her legs with quiet poise. "You said you needed to talk," she said simply, her voice calm, professional, the same tone she used in boardrooms when people tried to underestimate her. Lily looked up, mascara smudged, voice cracking. "I know you probably hate me," she started, "and honestly, I don't blame you. I messed up. I lost everything. The brand deals, the apartment, the followers, they're all gone. And now I'm drowning in debt. I can't even pay rent." She gave a broken laugh, the kind that hides humiliation. "I thought I had it all figured out, you know? I thought success was about being seen, but it's just smoke." Emily studied her sister, the golden child, the center of attention for as long as she could remember. And for the first time, she didn't feel envy or resentment, only an unexpected softness. "You don't need to apologize to me, Lily," she said quietly. "You need to decide who you want to be when nobody's watching." Their mother winced slightly, as if the truth were impolite. "Emily, dear, your sister's been through a lot. Maybe you could help her? Just until she gets back on her feet." Emily looked at her mother, the same woman who once told her not to take risks, to be sensible, the same woman who canceled her 30th birthday dinner because Lily had a flight to Paris. "You mean money?" she asked. Her mother hesitated. "Well, yes, if it's not too much trouble. You've been so fortunate lately." Fortunate. The word hit like a stone, as if what she had built was luck, not years of sacrifice, loneliness, and relentless work. Emily's smile was polite, but her eyes hardened. Fortunate? That's one way to put it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a copy of Forbes, sliding it across the table. On the cover was her face, sharp and confident beneath the headline, "Emily Parker, the woman who changed how America saves." Her father's jaw tightened, his pride warring with shame. Lily stared at the magazine, her eyes wide. "You're on the cover?" Emily nodded. "I thought you might have seen it." For a long, heavy silence, no one spoke. Then her father cleared his throat. "Emily, we're proud of you. We should have said it sooner." Emily met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "You should have seen me sooner," she said softly. "But I'm not angry anymore. I just learned that love without respect doesn't mean much." Lily broke down crying, covering her face with her hands. "I was awful to you. I used to laugh when Mom compared us. I thought I was winning, but I was just shallow." Emily leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. "You weren't shallow, Lily. You were chasing what they told you mattered. You can still change that." For the first time, Lily nodded, not defensively, not proudly, but honestly. Their mother looked like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Emily stood, smoothing her blazer. "I'll help you," she said finally, "but not the way you think." Lily looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm not giving you money," Emily replied. "I'm giving you a job." Lily blinked. "At Bright Budget?" "At the foundation I'm launching. It's called the Parker Initiative. It'll help women who've lost financial independence, whether through bad luck, bad advice, or bad choices, rebuild their lives. You can work in communications, tell stories that matter." Lily's mouth fell open, half gratitude, half disbelief. "You'd trust me with that?" Emily gave a small smile. "Trust is earned, but redemption starts with responsibility." Their parents exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react. "Emily," her father said slowly, "that's, generous." Emily turned towards him. "It's not generosity, Dad. It's accountability for all of us." She walked towards the door, pausing to look back one last time. The house that had once felt like a cage now looked small, faded, irrelevant. "Take care of each other," she said quietly. "I have a flight to catch." "Where to?" her mother asked automatically. Emily smiled. "Paris." She left before they could respond, stepping into the crisp evening air. Outside, the world felt wide open, electric. Her driver opened the car door, and as she slid inside, her phone buzzed. A message from Catherine Shaw.
Congrats, boss. The keynote in Paris is confirmed. You'll be representing the U.S. tech sector. Emily looked out the window as the city lights blurred by, the irony of it all washing over her. Paris, the place her sister once flaunted as proof of her superiority. Now Emily was flying there not as a tag-along, not as someone's forgotten sibling, but as the head of a company that had reshaped the conversation about money, independence, and power. As the car merged onto the highway, she exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years lift off her shoulders. This was her full circle moment, not revenge in the petty sense, but justice wrapped in peace. She didn't need to scream or gloat or prove anything anymore. The world already knew who she was, and for the first time in her life, that was enough.
The jet skimmed through a pink Paris sunrise like a blade of light, and as the city unfolded beneath her, Emily Parker pressed her palm to the cool airplane window and let the hush of altitude settle her nerves. She had dreamt of this view once, years ago, from a cubicle in Chicago, never imagining she would return to the same city her sister once flaunted as proof of superiority. But this time, the ticket bore her own name in embossed letters beside the words, Keynote Speaker, Global Women in Tech Summit. When she stepped off the plane, cameras flashed, translators murmured, assistants hurried to keep up, yet Emily walked slowly, savoring the stillness behind the noise, the way power felt when it no longer needed to announce itself. Her hotel suite overlooked the scene, the same view Lily had once posted online with the caption, Living My Dream, and Emily stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, realizing that her own dream didn't need filters or hashtags. It was solid, earned, alive. She spent the morning rehearsing her speech, but found she didn't need the script. Every word she had written came from the life she had lived, carved out of rejection, neglect, and stubborn belief. When she arrived at the convention center, the marble atrium shimmered with banners bearing her face beside the phrase, Empowerment Through Knowledge. The sight made her chest tighten, not from pride but from awe at how far pain could travel when transformed into purpose. Backstage, Catherine Shaw squeezed her shoulder. You've made it, kid, she whispered. Emily smiled. I was always going to. They just didn't see it. The lights dimmed, the host called her name, and the applause that followed felt like thunder rolling through time itself, shaking loose every memory of being ignored. On stage, she spoke not about profit or valuation, but about dignity. For a long time, she told the crowd, her voice steady and warm, I measured success by who noticed me. I thought being seen was the goal, but I learned that the quiet work, the invisible years, that's where the real transformation happens. If you're building something and no one believes in you, build anyway. The silence means you're ahead of your time. The audience rose to its feet. Some cried. Cameras captured the moment, but Emily barely saw them. She was remembering a lonely birthday in a small apartment, a woman blowing out candles over a store-bought cake, whispering a promise into the dark. That woman had kept her word. After the speech, she was escorted to interviews, dinners, a private gala at the Louvre, yet through it all, she carried an inner calm, a kind of sovereignty that no accolade could enhance. Late that night, she returned to her suite, slipped off her heels, and opened her laptop to check emails. Among the congratulations was a single message from Lily. Em, I watched your speech online. You were incredible. I'm proud of you. I'm working hard at the foundation. It feels good to do something real. Thank you for giving me that chance. Emily stared at the words for a long time, her throat tightening. She typed back simply, proud of you too. Keep going. No resentment, no triumph, just truth. That was the final victory. The next morning, she walked the cobbled streets alone. No entourage, no press, just the soft hum of the city and the cool air off the river. Vendors were setting out baguettes. Children were laughing on their way to school, and for the first time in years, Emily felt entirely present. She crossed a bridge and stopped halfway, watching sunlight spark off the water, thinking about how revenge had changed shape somewhere along the journey, how it had started as a fire to burn away hurt, but had become a light that guided her instead. The world had ignored her once. Now it listened. Yet what satisfied her most was not the recognition, but the quiet knowledge that she had rebuilt herself without permission, without apology. Somewhere back in Illinois, her parents were probably watching clips of her keynote, perhaps realizing at last that love must be more than favoritism. She hoped so, but she no longer needed their realization to breathe.
When she finally flew home, the Foundation's new office greeted her with laughter and fresh coffee, and Lily leading a workshop for women learning how to budget their first paychecks. The sight made Emily pause in the doorway, her sister animated, alive, purposeful. It was as if the circle had closed itself. "Look who's back from Paris," Lily called, grinning. The team cheered. Emily laughed, a full, unguarded sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. She spent the afternoon answering questions, planning the next initiative, talking with women whose lives were changing because of Bright Budget. As dusk fell, she went up to the rooftop terrace overlooking the Chicago River, her city, her skyline, and watched the lights ripple across the water. The wind carried the faint sounds of traffic and possibility. She thought about the word success and how small it had once seemed compared to what she had built. Respect, purpose, peace. Pulling out her phone, she snapped a single photo, the skyline glowing like gold threads in the dark, and posted it with a simple caption: "Home." No hashtags, no brand tags, no need for applause. Within minutes, messages flooded in, thousands of women thanking her for inspiring them, but she closed the app and just watched the river flow. The revenge, she realized, had already happened long ago, not in one grand moment, but in every choice she had made to keep going when no one cared. The silence she once feared had become her armor, her cathedral. Below her, Chicago pulsed with life, indifferent yet beautiful, and Emily Parker, once the forgotten daughter, smiled into the night, finally at peace with the sound of her own quiet triumph.